Really, I've never seen my disability as a negative, and that's how my parents brought me up to see it as.
Yep.
So I've never really seen. I might have seen my disability separate to me in some ways, but I've just, I've just always just gone with the flow and been like, this is reality. Yes, I'd like life to be maybe a little bit easier at times, but life's pretty good. I'm lucky.
Welcome to Access All Areas, candid conversations about disability. My name's Fiona and I'm here with my guest today, Peta, and I'm going to throw it across to Peta to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Fiona. My name's Peta Hooke. I'm a podcaster and a disability advocate. My podcast is called I Can't Stand, and I interview people about what it's like for them to have a disability. I have cerebral palsy myself, but just because I have cerebral palsy doesn't mean I understand what it's like for everyone. So I sit there and interview guests and I learn along with the audience, and I love what I do.
That's really fabulous and so interesting. And you're right, like just because you've met one person with a particular type of disability doesn't mean that you know everything about that particular diagnosis or that person. And, it's just that refresh to make sure that we are all individuals and we treat each other that way.
Absolutely. And I think it's also on the opposite side of the coin. I always feel so great when there's commonalities and I'm like, oh, like my childhood was like that, or I felt this way. And it's just harks back to when I wasn't connected to the disability community at all, and realizing how many commonalities we do have within the disability community, even if we do have different disabilities to each other.
Yeah, it's really true because it can be very isolating at times as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little diversion before I jump into our standard questions and ask, tell me a little bit more about the podcast and what made you start doing that.
Well, it's a long story, but the précis version of that story is basically in my mid-20s, I walked or wheeled, depending on what word you prefer to use. I mean, the technical word is wheeled, out of university with a couple of degrees, including a master's degree, and I just couldn't get a job. Nobody would employ me in the area of my study, my area of my passion. So I eventually got a job, but it wasn't something that I felt very fulfilled in. Like, I loved the team I worked with, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't right for me. And I kept trying to apply for new jobs, and it just never happened. And then eventually I had a boss that was just in a maternity role. So they weren't part of the furniture necessarily. And they sat me down one day and said, what are you doing? Like, why are you here? You want to use your voice more effectively. And I took their advice seriously and very literally and started a podcast.
It's pretty amazing. And it's using, I guess, your skills and working out how to make things work for you, because it sounds like, and I know personally that, looking for a new job and looking for something that matches what your skills are quite often can be really exhausting. People with disabilities are way unemployed in most instances, or underemployed. And it is a really difficult thing. So for you to find that, I guess, resolution for yourself and go, well, you know what, like, I'll just make it happen. That's pretty cool.
I mean, it was certainly a pivot. I've got no podcasting. I did one little course in podcasting during COVID, but I have no formal qualifications or anything. So this is just me trying to figure it out as I go. And I love what I do. And the I Can't Stand podcast came from just being sick of being asked what happened to me by strangers when I went and got a coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I don't mind talking about my disability, and it's part of my job now, I know that that's not the case for everyone. Everyone doesn't have to talk to strangers about their disability. And not only that, it's not very efficient to educate one person one by one as you get your coffee every morning. So I feel like the podcast was a much better option and more efficient.
Definitely sounds like it. So my first question for you is, what do you think is the best thing about having a disability?
I think that people remember me by default. And, I think I sort of think of it as my key selling points. I love standing out and I love the fact that people know who I am and they remember me, even though I'm shocking at faces and names. And I wish I was much better at that myself. But no, I really do love that it gives me a key different perspective than a lot of other people. Yeah, I really see it as a positive key difference that I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. And was that something that took a while to get to, or was that something that kind of just happened organically?
Not really. I've never seen my disability as a negative. And that's how my parents brought me up to see it as.
Yep.
So I've never really I might have seen my disability separate to me in some ways, but I've just always just gone with the flow and been like, this is reality. Yes, I'd like life to be maybe a little bit easier at times, but life's pretty good. I'm
Mm-hmm.
lucky.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And, I guess it reflects as to, how you've been so successful and so, I guess, strong in all of the things that you've chosen to do, because it is something that you've just gone, you know what, this is me, this is who I am, and, take it as it happens.
I guess I'm not very good at thinking of myself as successful because I'm always thinking about the next goal, Fiona. Like, I'm not very good at sitting back and being like, well done, like that was big. I'm always like, okay, next strategy, next thing, what are we gonna do?
And look, I can understand because I'm very guilty of that, but I'm going to, like, right now, pat on the back. I
Thank
am
you.
fabulous and successful. Yay!
Yay.
There's your pep talk for the day.
Thank you.
It's all right, I'll send the check in the mail, yeah? Okay, so next is, what do you think is the worst thing about having a disability?
I think the worst thing about having a disability is just how hard it is to get around in the world, how inaccessible the world is. I think I find it really difficult to see other people experience barriers as well. I find that really hard. But I envy people that can just jump out of bed in the morning, go for a run, be really fit by default, and just have every opportunity that everybody else does without having to consider, how am I going to do this, or how am I going to get around this, or who do I have to organise to bring with me, or all those sorts of inherent extra things that we have to do when you have a disability.
Mm, mm. And it can be exhausting at times, just having to plan things and not have that spontaneity. Sometimes it's like, oh, it'd be so great to just bam, off you go and do something, and it's like, well, no, there's like 10 things that have to happen before that's even a thought that's gone across my mind.
And I think that's why I probably found my 20s the hardest, because a lot of my friends who weren't disabled were really spontaneous because they could be. And so I felt really disconnected with the 20-year-old I wanted to be and the 20-year-old I had to be with the restraints that I had. Like, I couldn't go backpacking through Thailand. Like, that's not a thing. So yeah, it's definitely getting easier as more people get older around me and settle down.
Yeah, yeah, very true. And I think that's, we do have that opportunity to, I guess, be more resilient and be able to think outside of the square and deal with challenges. But, sometimes it shouldn't have to be like that. It should be that, you can go to the shops and know that the stuff that you're going to need to do and access, just like everybody else, is available to you.
But not to be too toxically positive, but I do try and always think on the positive and think, well, I'm really grateful for the stuff I can do. Like, yes, and I don't really talk about much that I can't, because that's not really the way I think about the world. But I think I'm pretty connected and pretty grateful for what I can do and what I do every day. So I think that's a real positive with having a disability. A lot of us are very aware of how lucky we are to live the lives that we live.
And, just that mentality of I can't do it is something that many people just have as their everyday life. Like, just your average person puts those restrictions on themselves. And when you say, well, you know what? Maybe I can't do it the same way as somebody else, but I can still do stuff, and I will work out a different way of doing it. And that keeps that positive vibe. And I think it gives us that opportunity to really, view the world a bit differently, but experience things differently, and not get stuck in that I can't mindset.
And I'd be interested to hear what you say to this, Fee, but for sure, resilience comes from adversity. You build resilience because you've been through some hard stuff, but resilience does have so many positives. And I do really think that I feel sorry for non-disabled people that have never gone through anything and really struggle with their normal day-to-day, because they've never had to develop that resilience that many of us have just had no choice but to develop. Otherwise, we just wouldn't get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is everyone then has this opportunity to build resilience over time, and the things that happen to you create who you are and create that capacity to overcome the challenges. And the more challenges you have, the better at that you become. And for those people who, in some ways, you can say, oh, well, they're very lucky because they've never had to experience challenge. But then when they are faced with a major challenge of whatever description, they don't have the coping mechanisms.
Yeah, for sure. And let's be honest, we're the minority that people can become. They end up entering and becoming disabled eventually. So I might say this joke too often, but I often do say that I think my peak of my life will be at the nursing home, because I would have gone through all the challenges that everybody else is struggling to deal with. Oh my God, I'm in a wheelchair. I dealt with that when I was 6. Let's go have a champagne and enjoy life.
That's right. You're an expert.
Yeah.
Excellent. And my last question is, what do you wish that other people knew or understood about disability?
I think I just wish people would view disabled people in the same way that they view non-disabled people. I just want them to view us as equals, that people that deserve equality in every area of life, whether that be education, employment, access to the physical world. I just really wish that they would see the value in us as customers, and the fact that we do have purchasing power, and we are just another part of society that I think should be better recognized.
Yeah. And I guess that's something really powerful for everyone to take away, as what are you doing to be inclusive, and what are the things that you're doing to, potentially be differentiating people. And as we mentioned before, it's great, everyone's an individual, but having said that, we should all be making sure that we treat everybody with that level of respect, and giving people access to all of the things that they need to have access to.
Couldn't agree more.
Perfect. All righty. Well, to wrap up, I'm going to get you to spruik the podcast and any social media or anything where people can follow what you do.
So the I Can't Stand podcast comes out every Tuesday, on Podcast Tuesday, as I call it. It's on all podcasting platforms, and my Instagram handle is @PetaHooke, spelled PetaHooke.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to continuing to follow the podcast and hear all the amazing guests that you have on, and continue to watch your journey.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you.